Hello and welcome to the Today's Homeowner Weekly podcast. We're here to help you with the challenges we all face as homeowners. I'm Danny Lipford.
And I'm Joe Truini. And each week, Danny and I are here on the podcast to answer any and all home improvement questions.
And we want to hear from you. Send us your questions or comments at todayshomeowner.com/podcast.
Okay, Danny, let's get started.
Today's Homeowner podcast is brought to you by the Home Depot. Right now, we're going to go to Michigan and talk to Mary Beth. Mary Beth has some squeaky floors. Tell us all about it, and welcome to the show.
Well, I have more than some squeaky floors. My whole house squeaks.
Ouch. Okay.
And it started out, I have a two-story colonial. It started out on the first floor. You know, you walk in a room and you have a couple squeaky spots. And then it started up the stairs. And now, I noticed this week, I can't step anywhere upstairs or downstairs where I don't squeak. I mean squeak.
It's not your shoes, is it?
No, I'm in my bare feet.
Oh, okay.
It might be my bones. I'm, getting older. But right now,
Well,
no,
then,
I think
if that was true, you'd be squeaking in the supermarket and every place else.
I could be.
Are these hardwood floors, carpeted floors? What do you
They're
have there,
all
Mary Beth?
carpeted.
All carpeted. Oh,
All
okay.
carpeted.
Well, I'll tell you, on something like this, and this is going to sound like a very labor-intensive solution, but when you have something like this, what's happened here is the plywood and the framing joist under it have some space between them, and that could have happened a lot of different ways, expansion and contraction, and you have just that little bit of friction that's causing the squeaking for happening all over like that. And since it's so widespread, probably the only foolproof way of solving the problem is also, of course, the most expensive, and that's to roll the carpet and the pad back, put a series of screws going through the decking all the way into the floor joist, and you just do this very methodically all over the entire floor, and that will stop all of the squeaks. Now, another way of going that you might want to try first, and we've done this very successfully many times on stairs that you have access under. And now, do you have access? Now, if this is the second floor, you would not have access to that second floor because of your ceiling, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay. But downstairs, if you have a crawl space or basement?
I have a basement, and
Okay.
I can see the floor up. It's not finished.
Okay. Well, the problem with that is a lot of times, and if the house, approximately when was the house built?
1970.
Okay.
It's shifted. I think it's going to tip over.
Oh boy.
Oh, no.
Well, in 70, it could have been, depending on how they were building it exactly that time, it could be that you have just plywood and that you have your joist, your floor joist, and plywood on top of it. If that's the case, you actually can use a construction adhesive in a tube of caulk and caulk everywhere the plywood meets the joist. And then it's dozen tubes of caulk, and you just basically you're binding those things together to keep them from squeaking. Now, if you did that, of course, again, it's going to take quite a while under a basement, working overhead and so forth. I would venture to say you would probably knock out 50 to 75% of the squeaks. It just depends on how it's built. But upstairs, really, Joe, I think about the only way there would be having to peel that carpet back, unfortunately.
Well,
Yeah,
it's funny. I'm getting new carpeting
Oh.
next week. They're coming in next
I was going to
week.
offer you another suggestion, but if you're getting new carpeting, that's the time to do it. Leave time in between taking up the carpeting and them putting in a new one, obviously, because it's going to take a while. A house built in the 1970s, they may have just nailed down that plywood floor, the subfloor, which might be part of the reason it's popping up, and you're going to have to put down, I would use 2-inch screws and just put them wherever you need them.
And this is, and like Joe said, make sure you allow time for it. And I'm not sure the carpet guys will be patient enough to do this. So it may
you might
be
have to pull it up, right?
remove, to have someone help remove the carpet. And a great hint on that: don't try to pull those 12-foot pieces of carpet out there. Cut them in 3 or 4 foot runs, roll them up, throw them out the window, or take them down the stairs or whatever to make that a lot easier. Clean it up real well. Find where those joists are, pop chalk lines on it, and then put a screw in about every 6 inches. And that's the only way you're going to be able to seal it. I'll tell you something else that I like to do in a situation like this. Wherever the plywood butts together on the 4-foot side of it, I would caulk that. Even if it's just the simplest little crack, I would caulk that with construction adhesive, just so that you're doing everything you possibly can to keep those squeaks from happening. Then when you put the new carpet down, I think you're going to be in great shape. So that's a great advantage and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity when that carpet's up to fix that problem.
Well, I guess I know what I'm doing for the next 4 days.
Mary Beth, I wanted to mention a couple other things. One, there is a company that makes a product called Squeak No More, and it's meant for driving screws through the carpeting into the plywood, and that does work. Of course, you have to find out where the joists are, but that's another option if there are places where you're not lifting up the carpeting.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Well, the stairs and stuff. Now, I'm not getting new carpeting up in the hallway and down the stairs, but the bedroom's in my bedroom. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, we hope we've been able to help you on that. Now, certainly, again, a great opportunity for you to take care of it while that carpet's up. And if we can help you in the future, we'll be glad to.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, well, you
You're
take
welcome.
care. Bye-bye now. You know, Joe, we got such a great group of listeners throughout the country.
Sure.
We like to call them our Today's Homeowner community. And so many times, we encourage you to call the Today's Homeowner hotline. If you got something that strikes you, hey, I want to tell Joe and Danny about this particular thing. And a lot of times it may solve a problem that you have with your house. And some of them are fairly unique, like this particular call that came in.
Hi, guys. I have something that happened to me. You will not believe what happened. I purchased my home 20 years ago. Well, the house never was as warm as it could be in the winter and never was as cold as it should be in the summer. The problem with this house was there was only 2 return airs, and both return airs were on the lower level. But something strange happened. One day, after living here for almost 20 years, I walked past the return air near the front door and put my hand down there, and I could not feel any air being sucked in. This return air was directly above the furnace in the basement. So whenever you walk past this return air, you could hear it running. But in 20 years, I never reached down to actually feel. So I discovered that day that return air had been blocked off 25 years ago. And the only return air was the one way at the other end of the house in the dining room. Now I've got more air and more heat and air conditioning that I know what to do with. Of course, I've got a bigger system that I'm wasting money with, but now at least I've got 2 return airs and much better heat and cooling. That's just ridiculous, right? Wow. I mean, you live there for 20 years and you think that return air is actually sucking in, but because it's directly above the furnace, it's really just the noise that you hear and there's no air going through it. How about that?
Wow.
That's a good one, yeah.
Wow. Well, that takes a pretty big man to admit that maybe he hasn't changed that air filter in 25 years or something.
Maybe his wife doesn't listen to the radio. Maybe
I'll tell you, that's there's a lot of unusual things there with that, but it just goes to show you when you buy an existing house, certainly it's very important to have a home inspector take a look at it. It's also very important at least once a year to have your furnace serviced, and that's one of the things certainly they would discover in finding out, where the return air, how it's working, how the filters look, is there any, leaks or anything in the plenum area and that kind of thing. But boy, at least he ends up with a good end to the story. Sure. But 20, 25 years without checking out that return air, let's don't do that, all right?
Right. I can imagine listeners all over the country now running to their cold air return and unscrewing the register and sticking your hand down there, making sure it actually goes somewhere.
Or, when you have, this is a simple test by taking just a piece of tissue, Kleenex or whatever,
right.
And when the system's
one square
running, it's just hold it up there, and it should go right up against that and hold. Same way when you're, want to check your exhaust on your range hood over your cooktop, or even in the bathroom to be able to do that. But it does remind me. I had a home inspection business for years and years prior to getting busy with a television show and radio show. And I remember one particular gentleman, an older man that was following me around, that was the owner of the house that was selling the house. And I was walking down the hallway there, and of course, one of the things a home inspector will do is to, look at the return air, pull the grill down, pull the filter out, look around really well to make sure everything's fine. Just part of the inspection. Well, it caused just a little bit of a panic. And so I stopped and kneeled down, and the older gentleman says, well, what are you doing there? I said, well, I need to check in here. He goes, just a minute. And he peeked around the corner. I think he was locating where his wife was at the time. He came back in the hall and says, go ahead. Well, when I pulled that down, I didn't know what was going on or why I acted that way. But when I pulled the grill down and I took the filter out, well, there were a few bottles of whiskey.
Oh, no.
And a couple of them were down a little bit. I mean, he had 3 nice brands there, I'd have to say. But anyway, I was disclosing potentially his little stash there. So he says, we good? And I winked at him and said, fine. And I did not put that on the report, assuming when he left, it would leave with him. But you never know when you're out looking around a house what you might find. I almost caused a little panic there, but we worked it out, and everybody was fine. And the house was in fantastic shape, and I didn't find any other stashes anywhere else. But you never know what you'll find when you root around in a house like that.
Yeah, you sell the house and you get 3 bottles of whiskey as a bonus.
Bonus, yeah, exactly. All right, here we go with another question on our today's Homeowner Hotline. A good one here. Ken's on the phone right now with a few questions for us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Danny. I'm looking to redo my kitchen cabinets.
Uh-huh.
So I need to know 3 things. I need to know what's the best way to clean them, because I don't want to take them apart.
Okay.
So, wet and cold and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to know how best to clean them, and then what's the best kind of paint, and then I need a good indoor sprayer.
Okay. All right. Good. Be glad to help you with that. And, boy, it sure is gratifying when you get the kitchen all looking different. You can change the look of that kitchen in a short amount of time. Well, starting off with the cleaning, we use a lot of citrus cleaners, and you can also take a clean sponge, slightly damp, heat it up in the microwave for 15 or 20 seconds, use a vinyl glove, and boy, that'll cut that grease right off of it. So, degreasing the surface is really the first step. And then, of course, lightly sanding the surface after it dries is also very important for basically etching any gloss off of it so that the paint will adhere to it well.
Yeah, there's not much gloss on those things.
Okay, all right. Well, sure. Well, that'll help a little bit. Just use a sandpaper, like a 200 grit sandpaper, to just smooth it out. And again, just think of it as cleaning. Then, now, are you planning on replacing any of the hardware?
No, the hardware on there is fairly new. We've done this once before,
okay,
but I guess the paint that we use just isn't that great, so it's kind of starting to look grimy around the edges. Kids were growing up, so around the handles and all that, but the handles are fine. They're pretty good looking.
Okay. Well, you may still want to take the handles off, and you might be able to work around the hinges by covering those with, some carefully placed painter's tape. Then when you get to the paint, we always like to recommend a bonding primer. It's available in latex, and it basically just provides a really good surface for your finish coats to go on. And
latex bonding primer.
Bonding primer. Uh-huh.
All right.
And so you put a light coat of that on, and just make sure you read the directions on how long it should dry. And then you'll want to apply 2 coats of acrylic latex, and we generally would recommend a semi-gloss for cabinets. Just gives it a little more durability. If you don't want that much of a gloss, you can go to an eggshell finish. Still very durable, but those 2 coats are important because giving you the thickness and the millage and the durability, washability, and all of that. Now, when you get to spraying, especially on the inside, the HVLP type sprayers, the high volume, low pressure type sprayers, is something that we've used a lot. And Joe, I know that you've used that a lot when you're talking about interior trim and interior cabinets.
Yeah, Ken, I used it, and I repainted our kitchens recently. And yeah, you can get, I don't know if you can rent them, but you can certainly buy them affordably enough, HVLP They're not great for spray painting an entire room, but for cabinets, they're perfect. They put out just the right amount of paint. They're easy to control. There's very little overspray because the LP stands for low pressure, and that's why. So I would definitely look into that.
Yeah, well, the overspray is the concern because we just put in floors last Christmas.
Well, I'll tell you,
put down as much,
as
many tarps as you can.
Right, and get some of the wide painter's tape that you can kind of tape off, with plastic, or a lot of times we use the thin brown paper, that comes in rolls that you can, go overboard on that. Just really put plenty up, because it's easy to take right down when you get through, and you don't want to have to do any cleanup or anything. But I'll tell you on that HVLP sprayer, there's been some problems with those in the past, just not really working well. But on our television show, several times this past season, we used one from Homeowner, and actually you can order it right out of the Woodcraft catalog, woodcraft.com. You can just go there and look at the Homeowner HVLP sprayer, and man, it just works surprisingly well, very inexpensive. And we did cabinets, we did island cabinets, we did doors, and it's easy to clean, and it seems to be holding up very, very well. So that's one we definitely would recommend. But it sounds like a great project, and one you'll be glad to see once you get it all completed.
I'm ready to do it.
Hey, Ken, one last bit of advice is when you use this sprayer, get a big piece of cardboard and test it a couple of times, make 2 or 3 passes, adjust it as needed, because you don't want the paint coming out too lightly or too thickly, and it kind of gives you the feel for it. And when you pass that, you don't make a sweeping motion. It's perfectly parallel with the surface. That's the hardest thing for a do-it-yourselfer to get used to. You move perfectly parallel, not sweeping back and forth. So, because otherwise, of course, it'd be really light on one end, really heavy in the middle, and really light on the other end. So, you'll get the hang of it. It only takes a few minutes.
I'll practice a little bit.
There you go.
Practice on your neighbor's cabinet.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, thanks, Ken.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, take care. We always like to feature a few recording calls that we have. We got a lot of them this week, and we appreciate all of them. Let's tackle a few of those.
I have a question about removing black roof stains on asphalt shingle roof. I've tried the spray-on products in a bottle with a hose and didn't make a dent in the black stains on my roof. Maybe you have another suggestion for me I could try.
Okay. Well, it really depends on what's causing that. It could be mold, mildew. It could be a lot of, things dripping off of trees, that type of thing. It could be the shingles not performing as well as they could. So it is a particular challenge on that. Now, I notice more and more there are a lot of services out there, companies that offer roof cleaning. They all have their own special method of doing that. The main thing is it has to be a passive process so that you're not shortening the life of the shingles or causing any problems there. Now, the spray that we've heard many people use is one of our longtime sponsors, Wet and Forget. And to be able to spray it on, now you got to be patient. It can take 6 or 8 months for it to really clean as sufficiently as it could. But I would still, if you have not tried Wet and Forget, I would certainly try that. And with the hose-in sprayer, we'll spray up to 30 feet. So a lot of times you don't even have to get on a ladder, or if you do, maybe it'll keep you off the roof by spraying from the edge. But that's worked for hundreds and hundreds of people that we know there. I think I would try that.
I have a house that was built 6 or 8 years ago. It is 1/3 brick and stone. And my question is, do I need to do anything with that to take care of that? Do I need to put any kind of sealer on there? Do I just let it go the way it is? There's ledging underneath windows, that snow will sit on. So that's my question. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm assuming this brick is not painted. So so if the brick and stone is unpainted, then I would absolutely apply a clear masonry sealer. And there are lots of brands out there. It's readily available. Let price be an indication of quality, meaning buy the best one you can afford, just like if you're painting. It's completely clear. It soaks into the stone. So I would put it in a pump-up sprayer, like a garden sprayer, 3-gallon or 5-gallon sprayer, and just spray it. It's hard to apply too much of this stuff because it's just going to get soaked in. And pay particular attention to the mortar joints in between the bricks and in between the stones. And the ledge you're talking about, it's stone, I assume, so I would definitely soak that as well. And that should pitch down. The idea is if any snow or rain hits that, it melts and it would run off. So, I mean, if it's not pitching down, I don't know what to tell you, but definitely soak that as well, because you want to make sure that it doesn't absorb any water, then freeze and crack it. So, all right, let's go to the next question.
I have an upstairs bathroom with a sink and a shower. I am getting hot water to the sink, but not the shower. I'm starting to get a tiny leak down below and was wondering if it might have anything to do with the faucet or the handle.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, so many times when you're not getting hot or cold water to the shower, it's all about a little bit of debris that has kind of deposited in the actual valve. So what you would want to do is turn the water off to the house, remove the excussion plate around the valves, remove it, and if it's a single lever faucet, which so many are in showers, then that little Teflon ring that's in there, you remove it, and a lot of times you'll immediately see what a lot of times can be an alarming amount of debris in there that, part of it's just accumulation over the years, part of it is the little shavings left over from installing the plumbing and pipe, debris, a lot of things that can get caught in there. And the little bitty washers, it can totally close off either side, hot or cold. Most of the time when you have a situation like that, that's what you'll find. So if you're not comfortable doing it, it's well worth having a handyman or a plumber take care of it for you.
I had a question in listening to a previous show some time ago about cleaning laminated flooring. I didn't note it as far as the main ingredients and the ratio for the mixture. It was a vinegar and water solution to strip wax from a laminated floor that shouldn't have been waxed. And I was attempting to try to obtain information as to what that formulation was. So if you could provide me with that information, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. First, you're right. You shouldn't be waxing a laminate floor, but the solution was a 50-50 mix of white vinegar and water. And you can use that to clean the floor. And if that doesn't work, you can bump it up, because you might find some areas that are, wax might be a little thicker or whatever. So you can bump it up to maybe 75% vinegar. But that's all you need to do. And use a cotton, either a white cotton cloth, nothing with any kind of color in it, or a scrub brush. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
If your house is settling and the porch stoop is breaking away from the foundation, who would you call? What service would you call?
Okay. Well, the foundation guys, the foundation services that offer waterproofing of basements and also have a number of systems usually to do with foam to raise an existing slab, or in this case, a porch, to tilt it back toward the house. Our services that are all over the country. There's a lot of them. Most of these can be regional companies that may handle work in 6 or 7 states, something like that. So you can just maybe Google for your area, do a search on foundation specialist in your area, and then just talk to them. It's a very common problem having a concrete porch tilt away from the house, unfortunately, because so often the case they're not tying the structures together. I mean, it's part of your house. It should be part of your house. And a lot of times they pour it separately or after the original construction, and it's just not tied together. Now, rarely is it a severe problem. A little bit of settling like that would require you to fill in that crack to keep rain from getting down in there is usually all that's necessary, but either a foundation specialist or a structural engineer would probably need to take a look at it to make sure that it's not actively continuing to move.
I was wondering, when you spray foam insulation a house, if you're spray foaming up between the rafters to the deck of the roof, is that going to cause moisture problem later down the line?
That's a great question, and it is an area of concern. The insulation itself doesn't cause the moisture problem, but it will conceal that. It will conceal a moisture problem because unlike other insulations like mineral wool or fiberglass, once you spray foam up there and it hardens, how do you remove the insulation to inspect the roof deck? There's no way, virtually no way to do that. So that's where there's been some trouble in different parts of the country where there's a roof leak, and by the time anybody discovers it, it's already rotted out all the plywood. So I guess the quick answer is the foam itself doesn't create the moisture problem, but it will, if there is a moisture problem, it's hard to detect it.
But it certainly emphasizes how important it is to really inspect your roof well and make sure that any of the areas of debris that's gathering behind the chimney, in the valleys, especially this time of the year. I mean, the leaves are falling, and they're falling strong. So if you feel comfortable getting on your roof with your leaf blower on somewhat of a regular basis, that's a great way to go. If not, have someone take care of that for you. But it is important that you keep that debris away from it. Look for any popped nails, any loose flashing, anything that might lead to a roof leak. And if you're not comfortable on the roof, get a reputable roofer to do a roof inspection for you. It won't cost much, and you just want to make sure you get some references to where someone that's going to really shoot you straight on the evaluation of your roof. Very important part of your house. And as Joe said, a lot of controversy there with a lot of the foam insulation. I've certainly used it in my house and feel comfortable with it because it's a brand new roof, and hopefully won't have any problems with that. But it is something you have to be cautious about.
Hey, Danny, I thought maybe we'd have a quick trivia. You ready?
Oh, yeah, always love trivia.
Okay, well, I read something interesting. I thought I'd run it by you. You might know this, but for our listeners, here you go. Everyone is familiar with a Phillips head screw, right? Who doesn't use Phillips head screw? But hardly anyone knows the origin of this very famous fastener, like where it came from, why it was invented, what was wrong with what we had prior to that. I'll give you a minute or two to think about that.
It
don't
seems
go
like,
to Google.
Yeah,
That's
don't
the
Google it.
rule.
No, that's not fair. But it seems like I heard this a while back, and it seemed like it surprised me, if I remember correctly, that it was so recent that I think, you think of something, it's been around since 1803. And it's time for our Best New Product segment, brought to you by the Home Depot. Christmas shopping doesn't always mean you have to get the biggest and coolest tool on the market. If you're shopping for someone who is always on their feet, you might want to show their feet a little love with the Wolverine Legend full-grain leather waterproof composite toe boots. These things have a feature they call DuraShock technology. Essentially, it means they add more comfort into every step, absorbing shock and returning energy. The waterproof full-grain leather upper and moisture-wicking lining ensures that your feet stays dry and comfortable all the time, and that makes them perfect for the hard-working person on your Christmas list. For more information on the Wolverine Legend full-grain leather waterproof composite toe boot, log on to HomeDepot.com. We were talking about the Phillips head screw. It seems like that's been around forever and ever, but Joe, you have a little background on it, and I would venture to guess that it was invented by a guy named Phillips or Mr. Phillips, one or the other. Or Detective Phillips or Scientist Phillips or something.
You're getting close. Yeah. Engineer Phillips.
Engineer,
it was
really?
Henry M. Phillips. I often wonder about that. Like, so often these are named after people with like really nice normal names. What if it was Mr. Bobolinsky? Would be the Bobolinsky screw. But anyway, it happened to be a guy named Henry Phillips in 1936. So as Danny referenced earlier, it's not as old as you might think. But in any case, it was invented and was in Providence, Rhode Island. And its first customer was the Cadillac Motor Car Company.
Really?
And the reason that manufacturing was looking for something other than the slotted screws, it needs something that could drive quickly with power tools. And the actual name is Phillips Recessed Head Self-Centering Screw. So that pretty much tells you why they wanted it. The bits would go in self-center, and it would self-center, and it wouldn't slip out as easily because it was a recessed head. And that is called cam out when the screwdriver tip pops out. So this was, if you've ever used a slotted screw, you know why they invented the Phillips head screw. So there you go.
That's pretty good. Well, and if you're using a drill driver and a bit on a slotted regular screw, you can understand why Engineer Phillips did us a favor, because it is. They should eliminate all those. You don't need any slotted screws anymore.
When I run across a slotted screw in like a package of hardware I just throw them out. I don't even bother using them.
I throw them out.
I know I have a slotted screwdriver somewhere. I use it to pry open paint cans, but I don't remember last time I used it to put in a screw.
Hey, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk to Chelsea Lipford Wolf, who is on the road this week, but sharing a few things about the world of checking in with Chelsea. How are you, my dear?
Hey, guys. How are y'all doing?
We're doing
Hi,
great.
Charles.
Everything's going good. I heard you had an interesting project recently. I have not been able to see it yet, but backsplash is still that trend, and the popularity of that is not going away. You undertook one very recently.
Yeah, so actually from a trade show we went to a couple of years ago, Tight Bond had this adhesive on display called Tight Grab, and they literally had a brick on the wall held up with this adhesive, and I was fascinated and have been dying to use it on a project ever since. And so I finally found the perfect project, and that is using split bricks to make a backsplash. And if you don't know what split bricks are, it's basically, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically like a brick that's cross-sectioned. It's cut into multiple pieces.
Right, usually
like a thin slice of brick.
Yeah, like half-inch, 3/8, something like that. Yeah, in some areas of the country, especially in the southeast, there's a lot of split brick floors that were extremely popular for a while, and then people found they could use it on vertical surfaces. But this sounds pretty intriguing. So it was a traditional size brick face that you used.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and just laid it like put it on the wall like you would subway tiles, but instead of using traditional thin set to hold it on the wall, I used this Tight Grab adhesive, which is really thick, and so it's not going to run down the wall while you're hanging it, and it dries really fast, so you're not having to hold the tiles on the wall or the bricks while it dries. You put them on, and then you keep moving on, and you don't have to wait for the thin set to dry. You can move on to the next step, which is grouting.
Oh,
Did
boy.
you have to use spacers, Chelsea, for any reason?
Yeah, I did use spacers, and I did. I think I used 1/4-inch spacers just for a thicker grout line that would look more like brick mortar joint.
Right.
And
exactly,
then we used an angle grinder to cut them, and then it's pretty straightforward. And of course, I have a video of how I did it on my website at checkinginwithchelsea.com right now for everyone to go and see how to do it for yourself.
Oh boy!
Do the bricks come a different color, or are they all red like traditional red brick?
Yeah, these were a different color. There's a few. It's kind of a gradient throughout the box.
Right. Yeah.
So you can kind of mix.
Oh, that's
but
nice.
This was kind of a grayish, reddish tone that were in the collection that I used.
That's cool.
Boy, that sounds pretty good. And being able to, install it and then basically turn right around and grout it, boy, that saves you a lot of time talking about knocking something out in a day. And then I guess you could allow it to dry for a little bit and actually put a sealer on it to make it more cleanable.
Right. Well, I actually ended up sealing it before I grouted it to make it so that the grout wouldn't stick to the bricks. Because those bricks are so porous.
Oh, that's another great idea because you would have a lot of cleaning after grouting that if you didn't seal it up like that. Well, that's great.
But yeah.
Sound like
it worked out great, and you can of course see the pictures in the video at checkinwithchelsea.com.
And we certainly appreciate our friends at Tight Bond for making that available to us to be able to use that on a perfect project like that. A nice split brick backsplash. That sounds great. Well, I'll let you get back to your work there out on the road, and be safe traveling, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
And again, that's checkinginwithchelsea.com, a awesome website, and dozens and dozens of great videos and episodes from Checking In with Chelsea. So make sure you check that out, and I'm sure we've intrigued you with the idea of a split brick backsplash, and she actually got those split bricks from our friends at Home Depot. So all you need to know is right there at checkinginwithchelsea.com. So glad that you're with us this week. Hope everything's going well. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving and you're able to pause a little bit and show your thanks to all the great things that are happening. Maybe your life isn't going exactly the way you want it, but it's not hard to look around and realize you got it a lot better than many others around. So be thankful for what you got, and that includes your home. 96% of everybody listening to us here on today's Homeowner Radio currently own a home, and that other percentage there certainly are probably looking at buying a home. That's why we feel so good when we're able to share with you a lot of the different things that you need to know about your home so that it doesn't become a headache or a burden, because it can be a very pleasant experience being a homeowner. And part of that is learning the little things like our simple solutions that Joe shares with you every week. Joe, share with us another one.
Okay, Danny, this is one for it's actually a couple little tips. If you're installing baseboard molding or shoe molding and you have to cut what are called coped joints into the corners. These are for the inside corners. On the outside corners, you can just cut a miter joint, 45-degree miter joint, but on inside corners, you really should cut a cope joint and it's called a cope joint because you use a coping saw, and the two pieces fit tightly together. And what you'd first do is you trim the molding at 45-degree angle, then you use a coping saw to cut along the profile. But in order to see that exact cut, what you do is take a pencil and rub it along the edge of that 45-degree cut, and what it does is it highlights exactly where you need to cut and makes it really easy to do. So once you cut it away, what you're basically doing is kind of back cutting the molding so the next piece of molding will fit tightly into it. But after you cut it, it'll be a little rough and the fit won't be great. And the easiest way to sand that I've discovered, they make certain tools and files, but what I do is I just get wooden dowels, just like 6 or 8 inches long, of various diameters that are roughly match the radius of the cut that you made in the molding, and just wrap it in sandpaper and just kind of rub it back and forth, and you can get a perfect fit where when those two nest together, you'd never know there was even a seam there. So that's a trick. First, highlight the cut line with a pencil, and after you cut it, use wood dowels of various diameters wrapped in sandpaper to fine-tune the fit.
Boy, you really appreciate when you see someone, a trim carpenter, with that coping saw and coping those joints right out and then pulling it there nice and tight. And especially if you're talking about stain molding, because there's not much forgiveness there. It's got to be right because you don't want to gob a bunch of colored putty up in there to make it right. So you really admire those guys that can handle a good coping saw like that. Just several ways of doing it. And another great simple solution from my buddy Joe Truini. You can see 500 of these things online right now at todayshomeowner.com/simple solutions. And now it's time for our podcast question of the week, and you can send us one anytime by going to todayshomeowner.com/podcast. This one comes from Henson in Mississippi, and they ask, we have a white brick corner wall to the ceiling built around a small fireplace. For years, we used it for a wood-burning fireplace, and then had it replaced with a gas fire log. Our bricks are dirty and sooty. What can we do to get them nice and clean? And once we get them clean, can we paint them? Well, Joe, it sounds to me like good old TSP. We talk about trisodium phosphate a lot. Big, long word, but a very easy and simple cleaner that's available at any home center or paint store. And mix it appropriately. Make sure you take care of all of the safety precautions that go along with it. But it's a very great way of cleaning any kind of masonry, especially when you're dealing with something like soot and just general dirtiness around a fireplace. But after that, then you certainly can paint it.
Yeah, in fact, we often suggest using a TSP solution to clean surfaces, whether they're brick or stone or wood cabinets, prior to painting. Now, Henson doesn't mention whether the soot is old soot from the wood-burning stove or it's new soot from the gas log. If it's old soot from the wood-burning stove, then just clean it, as Danny said, with TSP, and that'll be the end of it because you're not burning wood. But if it has occurred since the gas fire log's been installed, I would absolutely call the gas company, have a technician come out to confirm that the gas burners are properly adjusted and that they burn correctly, because if they're burning correctly, they shouldn't produce soot. So you might want to, if it's being caused by the gas, then definitely have somebody come out and check it.
That's a good point. And of course, using acrylic latex over a previously painted surface like that will hold up great, make it more cleanable, and certainly give it a nice, fresh look. Thanks a lot, Henson, for sending in that question to the Today's Homeowner podcast. And again, you can send us one anytime by going to todayshomeowner.com/podcast. Thank you so much for that. And we really appreciate all the great reviews we've gotten recently. We appreciate each and every one of them, and that's allowing us to continue to reach more and more people each week with the Today's Homeowner podcast. Well, that'll pretty much wrap it up for this week. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. I'm Danny Lipford along with Joe Truini. We'll see you soon.